All right, welcome back to Jackass Politics, the show where we break down the week's political circus so you don't have to. I'm Ian.
And I'm Adam. We're deep into 2025 now, and things are moving fast, mostly in the wrong direction.
Yeah, the economy is shaky, the government is on the verge of shutting down, and climate change, well, if you were hoping for cooler heads to prevail, you're shit out of luck.
And this week, House Speaker Mike Johnson is steering us straight into a government shutdown as he fights with Democrats over the spending bills.
Because when your job is to govern, the best strategy is to stop the government from functioning entirely. It's like a chef deciding the best way to fix a bad meal is to set the kitchen on fire. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, yes, Doge again, sent an email demanding federal employees justify their jobs with weekly bullet points.
Love that. Nothing boosts workplace productivity like your billionaire boss popping in once a week to ask, so what do you even do here? And because no week is complete without an unhinged rant, Musk also hit the Joe Rogan podcast to defend Doge and take shots at the Associated Press.
Government officials used to release policy briefings. Now they just go on a 3-hour podcast to complain about journalists and talk about mushrooms. People's Union USA organized a 24-hour boycott of major retailers to push back against rising prices and corporate greed.
And what's this, a one-day boycott? That's real cute. But, the Montgomery bus boycott lasted 381 days and changed history. This is like skipping one Taco Bell run and calling it a diet.
Mm-hmm.
And on the foreign policy front, Trump's meeting with Zelenskyy went off the rails when he demanded more gratitude for U.S. support.
Yeah, I'm sure Zelenskyy is just so sorry he forgot to send a fruit basket between missile strikes. But while Trump is busy demanding compliments, the real crisis is happening here at home. His administration is gutting NOAA, the agency responsible for tracking hurricanes, climate change, and extreme weather.
Right, because ignoring storms has always worked out so well. Yeah. Hurricane warning? Nah, it's just windy. Let's see how it plays out. And that's why we've got government meteorologist and climate expert Eric Webb joining us today. We're going to be breaking down what these NOAA cuts mean, why they matter to your daily life, and why pretending climate change isn't real isn't going to make the storm stop.
Yeah, so stick around, because if you think the political climate is rough, just wait until you hear about the actual climate.
All right, so we've covered the political mess. Now let's talk about the actual storms heading our way.
Yeah, while Congress is busy shutting itself down, the Trump administration is gutting NOAA, which, is the only agency that tracks hurricanes, tornadoes, and the literal climate crisis. No big deal.
So today we're bringing in an expert who can actually explain what this means for all of us. Eric Webb is a meteorologist and climate expert who works in government forecasting and runs weatherweather.com. He's here to help us understand what these cuts mean, why weather tracking is important, more important than people realize, and of course to break down just how bad things could get if we don't take it seriously.
Eric, welcome to Jackass Politics.
Thank you for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Adam, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, let me kick it off here. So can you explain NOAA's role in weather forecasting and why it's critical for public safety?
Wow. Yeah. So NOAA is basically the backbone of everything, to put it bluntly. No matter what sector you're in, if you're in private sector, the government sector, DOD, anything, you're on a weather app, any of that, it's all eventually comes back to NOAA in some way, shape, or form. So I've heard a lot of comments about, my weather app says blank or my TV meteorologist says blank. They all get their information from NOAA. So, for example, weather models are run from the Environmental Modeling Center, which is part of NOAA. Watches, warnings, advisories, those alerts that come to your phone, when you got a tornado, winter storm hitting, well, that's originated from NOAA. Any of the TV forecasts where they show you, you guys have probably seen that in North Carolina a lot this winter, snowfall chances, it all comes from NOAA, all that. And having had some experience in different elements of the field and also academia, it all eventually, in some way, shape, or form, as a baseline, comes back to NOAA. And so gutting NOAA will have a major effect on every industry in this field. And so it's really, really critical that we don't keep cutting things the way we do blindly, because that's going to have repercussions for everybody, no matter where you come from, whatever background you have. Really, that's the fun thing about Mother Nature, is it doesn't care what political background you are. If you're, wherever you come from, it's going to do what it's going to do, and you have to be able to be ready for it. And so cutting NOAA is going to make us less ready for these events, because I'm sure everybody here that's watching this, or you guys, I'm sure can attest to, you've at some point in time, you've been impacted by some severe weather, something that was life-threatening, and having that weather information probably saved your life, property, etc. So, so it's very, very important and we take it for granted. People, like you said, forget how bad weather forecasting used to be. And even there was a time where, for example, we had a hurricane in the early 1900s in Galveston that killed 10,000 people overnight. It was the second biggest city in America at the time, believe it or not. And the hurricane caused about 15 to 20 foot storm surge, completely wiped it almost off the face of the earth. And then everybody moved into Houston. So if you wonder why Houston's gotten so big, it's actually large part because of that hurricane. So it changed the course of U.S. history, things like that. And so not having that information available to you and easily accessible, it's life or death for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and that kind of, I guess, leads us to the next question. So how does NOAA really collaborate with local governments and emergency services when extreme weather does hit?
Yeah. So, what they'll do a lot of times is they'll get together, they'll have meetings. I actually went to one a few weeks ago, integrated product warning team. We'll basically create contacts in the government. We also have things like NWS chat, social media. We have phones. We talk with a lot of different elements. I know we do even at our jobs. We got a major windstorm coming up tomorrow, so I'm going to be getting phone calls from different elements, weather service, different folks in DoD, public, and whatnot. And so we have many ways to connect with those folks, and we try to coordinate things usually many days ahead of time. So even before that watch warning alert comes to your phone, 3, 4, 5 days ahead, we're already looking at those things and trying to plan out how we're going to respond and how we're going to communicate that information, because that's really critical. So it happens quite frequently. If you get a really bad event, sometimes other elements, higher level parts of the government will get involved.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, I know we're recording on Sunday, and they're talking about there's supposed to be. I've seen quite a lot from you about how bad Tuesday is supposed to be. So I don't think so much for us here in North Carolina. It looks like the middle of the country is going to get slammed. So, when most people are checking the weather on their phone, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, can you walk us through how NOAA data actually powers those forecasts?
Yeah, so a lot of those forecasts, they use some sort of software in the tool to pull the data from NOAA, either from one of their servers. And usually what happens is weather app data, there's basically no human element involved in it. It's all robotic. And that's why it sucks a lot of times, because there's no expert hand in it, and it's just straight up model data. And that's why it changes so frequently. But it comes from NOAA. Like I said, Environmental Modeling Center runs a lot of those models, and it'll pull the data in. It'll do some calculation. It'll say, okay, you're at X point, so your weather forecast is this for the next several days. This is your chance of rain, etc. But there's no human element involved in most of those situations. And that's why weather apps can vary too, because they can pull from different sources. Someone might pull from a GFS model, one might pull from the NAM, GFS, or HER, etc. So that's why you'll see a lot of discrepancy. But again, there's no human element involved. And so that's it. And that kind of, I don't want to ad lib on it, but I know I've heard a lot about AI machine learning. And I think it's valuable to this field, I think, to do things very quickly. However, it's still reliant on a baseline set of data to work with. And when you cut that out by cutting NOAA and gutting, model data and the folks that work on those models, et cetera, that's going to permeate into the AI. It's going to make the AI worse because it needs something. It needs a baseline, something it can work from. And so kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face, so to speak. And so, It's integrated in literally everything I do. Every single day, I'm using NOAA data for 80-90% of what I do even. And I'm not even in the National Weather Service. Right. So it's telling how important it is.
Yeah, so that kind of takes us to our next question. As we know, this administration is making cuts to NOAA. What specific areas or programs are at risk, and what kind of impacts are we talking about from people's daily lives when they're going to check their weather?
Yeah, so I hate to be so negative, but almost anything. I mean, at this point, just objectively speaking, I mean, just from what I've seen, I mean, nobody's truly safe, I guess. I hate to say that, but things like research, like I said, modeling. I know that there's been a project. I think I don't know what the name of the acronyms stands for, but it's OAR. It's basically to upgrade all the weather radars in the United States.
Okay.
And we're still using WSR 88Ds. So those were installed in the 80s, right? So technology has advanced 40 years, and that's all of our radars are based on that. And so we're working towards trying to upgrade all of those. And it would probably take at least 10, 15 years. Well, now all those cuts and having not as many technicians and folks to operate and serve those radars and then upgrade things, that's going to hamper us. And really a lot of the radars too. I mean, so radar was created obviously as a function of World War II, right? And a lot of the reason we have a lot of radars is because it was a national defense concern. You know, we were worried about German U-boats flying around, going around the East Coast and the Gulf of America, Mexico, whatever you want to call it, the Gulf. We'll just call it the Gulf. To me, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's all the same. It's all the same to me. You know what I'm saying, right? And so it was created to need a national defense, and you'll actually see that now too. If you look at where a lot of these radars are placed, for example, the one we have here in my part of New Mexico is at Holloman Air Force Base, which has been around for a really long time. Then you look at the one that's in northeast New Mexico, that's at Cannon Air Force Base. A lot of these are located at military installations. And a lot of it is because weather radar was initially developed in that. In fact, the Weather Service as a whole was initially part of what the Army Signal Corps, I believe. So it was actually under the DoD at one point. And so, yeah, so the point is, weather is a life or death situation for a lot of folks. And back then, it was seen that way, and because it really wasn't truly a threat to us. And so you've also seen too internationally too. We all share weather data because it affects everybody, and it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't really care. What like say where you come from.
Sure. So how does a reduced budget affect the accuracy or timeliness of severe weather warnings?
Yeah, so it affects everything. So, for example, a lot of these weather service offices, I don't think people from the outside understand it, having worked with a lot of these folks really on a regular basis and having been to different offices and knowing folks that work in that. They're already short-staffed in most locations, or they're barely treading water. I know the office that's where I work at, the Weather Service office, they're down like 3 leads, for example. So yeah, and you can imagine how much strain that's going to put on resources. And now you're cutting those extra positions down, and now that puts even more strain and stress on those people that are actually working. So then it's easy, when you're working radar, you're looking at weather model data, whatnot, to miss something because you don't have that extra set of eyes checking on you. And you're also working longer hours more frequently. So you get strained that way. And then you have the other people. So not just weather forecasters, but you also have technicians, people that keep the software and a lot of the instrumentation and whatnot up to date. So I know there's a weather radar in central Illinois that they basically just came out and said that their technicians that were probationary employees are not going to be able to service the radars. Once the radar goes down, it's gone for good, pretty much, until we get the people there. So, and that's just one example. You have to have people also maintain, like I said, instrumentation. That also includes surface observations. So that includes, your weather stations and whatnot. Well, not everybody, weather forecasters can't necessarily do all that, right? So you have to have people that are experts in that and whatnot. So it affects everything. And then, like I said, when you have also people that are not working on the models and not working on a continuous process improvement of other forecast tools, which we call in the Weather Service they use called the NBM. It's National Blend of Models. Forecast. That's like the baseline gridded forecast. Well, when you're taking a lot of those cuts out, that's just going to make that forecast worse, that baseline. And then, of course, when you have less people working in those offices, now you don't have as much human input into adjusting said forecast. Now your forecast gets worse.
Yeah.
And so that's just one example. I mean, like I said, you can get this tornado outbreak or severe weather outbreak in the South. Well, if you're down 2 or 3 meteorologists and you have to work radar and you have to issue warnings like that, even you're short-staffed, you're just not going to be able to see a lot of those, and so you're going to miss them. You're more likely to miss them, and then people die or get seriously hurt. So, to me, it's just common sense that we shouldn't be doing this. It doesn't really matter where you stand politically at all. It's just everybody should care.
Yeah, and so so we're at or near tornado season, I think, right about now, and then hurricane season's what, June 1 on. So we're approaching pretty bad time to really be doing. Not that there's a good time, obviously, but what do these cuts mean for these major weather events? And as kind of a secondary question to that, do you think this will cause like local forecasters to just be more? Because my thought process is, okay, they're going to be more, I don't know, try to keep people warned and err on the side of caution and then if it doesn't come to fruition, people already have sort of a, I don't know, I wouldn't say a mistrust of weathermen or anything, but that stuff you see on social media. Oh, you said it was going to snow 2 inches and it was only 1.5. What should we expect from that?
Yeah, I expect it to get worse if we keep going down this path, especially. I think now you're not really seeing it yet because we haven't obviously had a huge weather event, but it's going to happen at some point. It's inevitable. You're going to have hurricane, you're going to have a tornado outbreak. I mean, this year, there's one of those years tornado-wise where it's going to be very favorable for a really big outbreak or two, a really big one. We've got all the right parameters for that. And then, of course, hurricane season, we get a storm in the right spot that hits all the big cities, say on the East Coast. Well, you're talking, $10-15 billion disaster in the right situation. Well, that's, several times the annual budget of NOAA. So you're getting one disaster, you get your return on investment from NOAA, one disaster, and for like 5 to 10 years. So to me, it's compared to what you're getting out of it. It's one of the few branches, a few elements of the government where you put a little money in and it's an investment and you get 50 to 70 times that back. I mean, just think about it. If you have a weather warning, say, and it tells you, hey, it's going to hail at your house and you're going to get golf ball to softball size hail, I should put my car in the garage. Yeah. And well, you think about you're only paying $5-ish maybe a year, right, tax-wise to fund NOAA. Well, you putting your car in the garage, not having to pay for a new windshield, pays for that for not just this year, but for the next 10, 15, 20.
Yeah.
That's one instance of that. Yeah. And you could point to many other cases. You had a tornado warning. Oh, crap, I need to. And then, for example, you got kids or whatever at school or whatever, and they're getting off the bus, and then you're having to worry, oh, crap, there's a bad system coming. I need to take them and, get in the bathroom, whatever, that's priceless. So you can't put a number on that. So again, to me, it's just common sense. It's a very small price to pay for, things in the long run. Now, that's not to say, I don't want to get it twisted, that I don't think there's things that we could do in the Weather Service that could be privatized. I've been all for things like, for example, creating an application that the Weather Service, I think that everybody's been pushing for that, maybe having a private entity come in and to do that. But my problem is, and I think it's kind of obvious, is that we don't have we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, if that makes sense. So we don't have the infrastructure scaffolding built out to really support them in the private sector or other sectors of the government yet to really make that transition. So that's my other issue with it. That doesn't mean, like I said, I'm not against private sector. If it was already fully established, very well built, we had all the tools there, I wouldn't necessarily be against it as much. But we're putting the cart before the horse, and we're just destroying it without having some backup plan or some sort of way to supplement that. And at this current time, there really isn't a way we can fully supplement. You have different elements and different private sector elements that deal with different parts of weather. For example, VISLA They run like lightning data. They help build like autosonde sites, which autosondes are basically their robots that launch weather balloons for us, for example. Okay. So you got Campbell Scientific, which helps keep a lot of instrumentation up. But again, it's kind of bits and pieces and piecemeal here, there, and it's not. There's nothing really consolidated with it. So that's my issue with it, and I'm trying to be as impartial as I can be. Sure. But that's just my personal take. I think and especially in the next several years, and really probably beyond that, cutting NOAA is going to have permeate down the road, because it's a domino effect, because as one thing gets affected, then it affects the next year, and then it goes the next year.
Yep.
So cutting NOAA now, and especially if we go with more cuts, especially if we see further decreases, the reduction in force that they're pushing, that's gonna hurt us for decades. I mean, you saw that with FAA air traffic controllers during the 80s when they went on strike and they fired them all. Well, we came back to some degree, but we haven't really fully recovered from that even, and it's 40 to 50 years down the road. Right. So that's something else we got to keep in mind. But again, it doesn't mean I'm against private sector. I'm not against coding, AI, or anything like that, but we need to have a way to supplement that, need to have a backup plan already well established and built. It takes time to build all those things, and just cutting it now and not having something to replace it is not okay. And the besides effect, I think it would probably end up costing you more, or the average person more in the long run. Say, I get this subscription for $9.99 a month.
Yep.
To get your weather warning, or pay extra to see extra information. I mean, you're going to end up paying more. That's not to say I don't think there should be options like that out there. I do believe that, but I think that there's a balance we need to find here, and I think kind of going too much in one direction.
Yeah. So you're discussing privatization, and that was actually where we wanted to go next. So. Some politicians are actually arguing that private companies can take over weather forecasting. So it sounds like based off of what you just said, you're not really fully on board with that, right?
No, they can't do it because all that baseline data comes from NOAA. So they don't have the infrastructure to run their own models, run nationally. They have all these relationships with all these partners going on, and have the resources to go into that. Private companies most times do specialized things in the field. Private companies in the weather enterprise, meteorology, they make a public sector product, government product better and specialized to a certain task. I hate to crap on them, but actually weather's not a good replacement for this. I'm sorry, it's not. I was even a kid and I knew that. Because I'd watch your forecast, compare it to, I did a fun little project and compared it to local and weather service forecasts. Yeah. Infinitely worse. So and there's stuff like that. And again, it's not to hate on them, but again, even them, they have that data. So whether they're using weather model data, gridded forecasts that they're adjusting, things like that, it all comes from NOAA. So, and that's just some of the forecast stuff. What about the weather satellites that are up? What about the weather, like I said, the weather radars and all that? That's again all tied in some way, shape, or form to NOAA. So cutting NOAA severely is going to affect all of those things. It's a pretty lose-lose situation for the average person. I just wish people would understand it a little bit more, be open to understanding it.
Yeah, and I think you pretty well covered basically all of our questions that we had on privatization of weather and the gaps that exist and where the issues would arise. You talked about AccuWeather's things that they can't do. They don't have the infrastructure to obviously. I don't know what the barrier to entry would be for investment and equipment and data and all that. I imagine it would be absolutely massive.
It would be astronomical. It would be probably several to tens of. It would cost us probably an order of magnitude more. So if we cut NOAA completely and say, okay, we're going to go fully private right now. Okay, that's great and all, but how much money is that going to cost you? Because now you have to transition all of that equipment, all of those resources. And then you have to build those connections and make sure everything actually works properly. Have the people to support that. Like I said, I'm not necessarily against something like that happening, but the reality is we are so far from that if we try to go in that direction, it's going to be extremely painful for a pretty long time. And so that's kind of what, that's kind of what I want people to at least understand.
Yeah.
Me, I don't want to have to pay to be notified of there's a tornado near my house either.
No, exactly.
Hey, there's a weather alert, pay $1.99 to see what it is.
I mean, what is a private company going to do? They're not just going to eat this cost for fun. Obviously, someone's paying for it, and it's getting paid for down the line. So eventually it makes its way to me, who wants to know, hey, this hurricane's coming. When is it going to be here? Or there's a weather that's possibly could result in a tornado. What am I going to do? And that takes us sort of to our next segment, which is more about like climate change and extreme weather events. Yeah. Are we seeing an increase in extreme weather events, and how does NOAA track long-term climate change trends?
So we are seeing a general increase for many reasons. We're pushing the climate out of its prior state. Mm-hmm. It's warming, and it's really because of CO2. And that's the funny thing about climate change is like there's no, both sides I think are wrong. This is how a lot of things work. I know just in general, societally speaking, is that there's two sides of an issue, and really bits and pieces of them are correct. In this particular case, I personally think, just having studied this for a while, that CO2 is and other greenhouse gases, feedbacks like methane and whatnot, are the main contributor, the primary contributor to modern climate change, which is from the mid to late 18th or 19th century onward. Mm-hmm. However, on the other hand, I hate to say it, I don't have the answer, because I'm not well versed in policy and things like that. That's not my strong suit. That's not my place to say anything. What I would recommend, but I also believe that even if we cut emissions to zero right now, we just said we're just going to cut everything right now, just cold turkey. Well, the climate system is going to keep warming for probably at least another 50, 60, 70 years. And that's because the half-life of CO2, which is basically, half-life is you put CO2 in the atmosphere, how long does it take for 50% of that to come back, and get absorbed and get put back into the earth? It takes about 100 years, 75 to 100 years. So that means even 200 years from now, 25% of what you do is still going to be in the atmosphere in all likelihood. And so and of course you have other things like the oceans that take a while, that lag and kind of catch up. And that gets back to your point about how do we measure that? We measure that with satellites. We measure that with surface observations. We have radiosondes, weather balloons, things like that. We have reanalysis models that then take all that stuff together and give us climate output. We also have climate models that we run, that we try to initialize or hindcast, which is hindsight forecast, basically looking at forecasts in the past, comparing it, to seeing how good it compares. So we use all that information to make those determinations. And we have other things too that we can use to measure, for climate change, like, sea ice, land ice, all sorts of different measures of it. And unequivocally it's warming, and it doesn't matter what you use. Even if you use satellite temperatures, which has been was a big talking point, it's steadily warming with time. It doesn't really matter what you look at. But like I said, the unfortunate reality is I think we're probably just screwed no matter what you look at, even if we stop now. I hate to be so pessimistic, but it would take such a long time for the system to catch up. We would have to take it out of the atmosphere. And even if we take it out of the atmosphere, the oceans are going to re-emit the CO2 that they absorb back into the atmosphere. So they're going to keep offsetting anything we try to do. Yeah. So we're kind of in there's a lot of lose-lose type situations. And so, it would be one thing, however, if we were, and so this is another great point about climate change. Oh, the climate was warmer in the past, this and that. Like, it doesn't have to do with the actual temperature. It has to do with the change in the climate. It's the change in the rate of change. Yep. If we were already in that hot house Earth climate where it was several degrees warmer than it is now, it wouldn't be a big deal because we're already adapted to it. And that's the problem, is when we change, it forces us to adapt, and that costs money, time, resources, and people, etc. And so that's the issue. And it really doesn't matter how it's changing, to be honest. It's the fact that it's changing, and that's going to force those things. And again, I don't have the answers for how we do all that stuff. Sure. But I think no matter how you slice it, I think we're just generally screwed. So
So what do you think the biggest misconceptions people have about climate science and forecasting?
I just think a lot of people get caught up into the policy making and get caught up into the political side. Both sides do, and I think that it's a lot of, you hear a lot of whataboutisms. What about X? What about Y? Mm-hmm. And really, instead of focusing and staying level-headed and looking forward and saying, well, what's really happening here? A lot of people, it's much easier to do that, especially now in today's day and age where we have social media and all these fun things that sensationalize everything. Yeah. So I think people get too focused on those extreme ends of the issue to reinforce their own point. We see this in a lot of things in life, not just politics. So that's kind of where I think a lot of it comes from, is you just get so focused on the policy making. But when you really look at the science objectively, you take your whatever lenses off, your own personal biases, you actually look at it, it is happening, and it is very, very almost certainly due to greenhouse gas emissions from humans. But again, the question of what do we do about it, all those things are separate. But the science is very clear. It's the policy making that I think where people get conflated, and then that's when they start going into denial, saying, well, this person said this, or this person's not taking it seriously, et cetera, and that kind of distracts away from the real science. But again, most people aren't going to see it that way. So,
yeah, sure. So looking at recent trends, and we know that, what parts of the United States in particular are at higher risk for more extreme weather in the coming years?
Oh boy. I mean, honestly, depends on what kind of extreme weather you're looking at, because it's just about anybody. Even here in New Mexico, we're in the middle of nowhere. We're protected. That's why they have some of the missile bases and the military installations out here, is because you're kind of protected from a lot of the extreme weather. Well, even here, we're going to have with extreme drought and extreme rain. So, for example, there's been a shift because we're in tornado season. We'll talk about that briefly, as we've seen an eastward shift in tornado activity and a forward shift in the season. So instead of it being in mid to late May, early June, there's been a shift over time with more and more tornado activity in the earlier part of the season, because now in the early part of the season, your limiting reactant is getting it warm enough and humid enough to generate instability and thunderstorms. Well, now that things are getting warmer, now you have that fuel that you didn't have before. And so a lot of areas, especially east of I-35, like in the east central U.S., mid-central Mississippi Valley, into even parts of the southeast U.S. in the early to middle part of the spring, seen an increase there. Wildfires, of course, obviously out west, not just because of the fact that it's warmer and you're drying things out quicker, but there's feedbacks that occur because then you're warmer and drier for 7 consecutive years, and then it's even drier, then it feeds back on itself, and then you don't get the rain because now you can't recycle whatever moisture that's left over, and you're losing snowpack, so you're losing all that additional water. Yep. It needs to hold you through the warm season in places like California, so you're not getting that. But then when you do get rain, it's even heavier, and it's not likely to be sort of a soaking rain. You know what I'm saying? Like a good stratiform light to moderate rain. You're more likely to get the extreme of one or the other. Either it's incredibly dry or it's going to be incredibly wet. For example, of course, heat obviously is the big risk, and cold to a degree. Of course, hurricanes. I mean, we saw that with Helene last year. I know we don't need to be reminded of that in North Carolina. I know, that was devastating. Things like that. The ceiling for those kind of events, I should say, is generally taking upwards. So really, and it depends. Like I said, it depends on what you're talking about and what part of the country you are. But really, you can't really hide from it even almost anywhere you go. It just depends on what you're actually dealing with. Yeah.
So, where do you recommend people go for the most accurate and up-to-date weather information?
Yeah. So what I recommend is go to the Weather Service site. That's what I do every day. Talking to the meteorologist, what's the first thing I look at? If I want to see how cold or warm it is outside, I would see if you have a personal weather station. That's great. Kudos to you. I really wish I had one. I only have rain gates, so I'm slack. But I mean, I go to the Weather Service site first and foremost. I always look at other ASOS sites. So there's a place, Aviation Weather Center. Again, another element under NOAA that forecasts for airports. Don't you want to be safe, flying back or landing at an airport? You need to have that information, right? Well, they help run a lot of that. So that's another good place to check. Aviation Weather Center. NOAA, NWS. You can also go another site that's pretty underrated, I think, some like MesoWest. We use it here out west because it gets all of our SAM site, our automated weather stations, and they can do that all over the country. So that's another great place to go. Your weather app doesn't always update frequently like it should. A lot of times it can be hourly, 15, 30 minute, whatever. And it's a lot. I've noticed a lot of times, I'm not saying I downloaded my own weather app, but I just looked at other people had, and I said, yeah, that's wrong, or that's not updating properly. And again, having that weather app giving you that current weather information, you know where that weather information is coming from? It's coming from NOAA in some way, shape, or form. Yep. Unless you guys said your own personal weather station set up and all this fancy stuff, 95% of people don't have that. So
right.
But that's what I would recommend going, is those places. And of course, your local TV outlets, if you still watch TV. I still watch weather on TV because obviously I actually know a lot of people now that do that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I at one point was in a broadcast club, so I was able to get an inside look at how they do TV meteorology. And like I said, I can tell you that NOAA is critical as a backbone to that. So if you're saying, oh, well, I'm going to trust this TV guy. Well, if you cut NOAA, it's going to impact his weather forecast and how he does.
Yep.
I've been there, done that. And if you want to say private sector, I actually, at one point, I worked at NCEM, so Emergency Management North Carolina, during Hurricane Matthew. Not having that NOAA information affected our operations and our planning and response and whatnot. So it really doesn't matter where you go, what sector you go in. NOAA is literally everywhere. It's so ubiquitous, we take it for granted, and we don't really take time to understand where this information is really coming from.
So if NOAA does face significant cuts and this continues, what can the public do to support the work or stay informed?
Yeah, reach out to your congressman. Write letters to them. Reach out. Try to advocate for those things. Do what you can. Talk to your friends and family. Maybe if they're unsure about things, or maybe they're skeptical, this and that. Let them know that this is a real thing. Really, there is only so much you can do once you get to a certain point here. But I think try to stay informed. Try to stay open-minded to things.
Yeah.
I know I've seen a lot of people, and I hate to say it, I know there's a lot of bots and this and that, but you get a lot of responses that are, people are just mad, or they don't understand it, or they say, oh, my weather app says this and that. People need to take the time to sit back and let, in this age of, I can't think of the term for it right now, but in this age of, misinformation and whatnot, take the time to actually listen to people that actually do this for a living, or spent their entire lives studying this, and try at least keep an open ear to that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's what I would say in terms of how you could do things.
Yeah. And I think you and I talked on Twitter chat. That's how we ended up meeting each other. How the magic works. When apolitical people start talking and they're telling us things, we should probably pay attention, right? Like, y'all are not speaking out just because this is a political thing. Yep. This is, as you said earlier, life or death, right? Yep. And so we just want to make sure that we're helping amplify you. We do appreciate you coming on today. Yep. Where can people find you, and what are you trying to plug? How can we help you?
Yeah, so you can find me obviously on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky as well. I'm not there as frequently. I just kind of like my backup. Yeah. In case Twitter blows up or whatever, how that
we can all hope.
I guess my Instagram got sold the other day, apparently, to something. So I always have a backup just in case things go awry. But you can find me there, Web of Weather. If you want to talk to me, this and that, let me know. Reach out if you can. I try to be on there at least semi-frequently and check things. I'm on some weather forums. This, not to Southern Weather, I think WX, I'm on there sometimes as well. That's probably how you could probably reach me best.
Cool.
Well,
awesome.
Well, thank you so very much for thank you so much for being here. Everybody go check him out on Twitter, and he does a lot of great forecasts, letting us know about all the severe weather and how these cuts are affecting us. Thank you again, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, guys.
See you.
All right. We just covered how the government is gutting NOAA, but that's just the tip of the iceberg this week.
Yeah, there's plenty more. A potential government shutdown, breakthroughs in quantum computing, shifting U.S. policy on Ukraine, and a major development in cancer treatment.
It's a mix of chaos and progress. And as always, Ian and I have some thoughts.
All right, let's dive into This Week in Chaos and Progress, where we try to make sense of it all.
So, Ian, we got coming up a government shutdown. It looks like House Speaker Mike Johnson is leading the budget standoff with the Democrats, pushing for the government closer to a shutdown as the spending negotiations stall. I've seen Hakeem Jeffries. I think he released a statement this morning or last night. I can't remember, where he basically said, I'm willing to work with you on some stuff, but it's going to be on our terms, and we're going to make sure that like Social Security and all that is protected. So what's your read on the situation? Where do you think this goes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm kind of two minds there with Hakeem Jeffries in particular. It's okay to say that you're willing to work on this stuff, but it's going to be on our terms, and that's a good way to put this because we've talked about it before. We need to make things as difficult as possible as we can for them. Fight back at every single level. I will say, just as a kind of
So like somebody singing.
I still to turn it down. So yeah, I like that he's being a little tougher because in the last couple of weeks we've seen some instances where he was very kind of blasé about it all and not really trying to be very difficult and non-committal and all that. So that's a good step in the right direction. And I kind of want to ask you about this in particular. Mike Johnson so far, how do you think he's done? Because we're staring, we've had some trouble, or Republicans have had some trouble to this point with him. How do you feel he's done? Do you think he's been worth it for Republicans? Do you think that this is going to be another sticking point for him?
But he just got some of the budget language passed, and he only lost one vote in Thomas Massie. And it's kind of, for their side, he's got to be feeling pretty good. He had a lot of people really going on Twitter saying that, they would never vote for this package. And then they were getting ready to pull the vote. And then all of a sudden, I guess Trump got involved and was yelling at people. Heard he was yelling at, I think her name was Spats, the one that's from Ukraine, that he was yelling at her through the phone so much that people, like reporters, were able to hear what he was saying.
So this is this is where my question sort of comes into play. So we saw the vote for speaker when it first happened. We had I think three or four non-votes for him, or voted for somebody else entirely between he and Jeffries. And then Trump gets on the phone and starts yelling at them, and they flip their vote. At what point does Trump, do you think he ever feels like, hey, I shouldn't be having to do this? Like, you should be able to do it. Or you think Trump's just totally cool with it?
I think Trump's cool with it. He's in the driver's seat. Mike Johnson has just totally allowed him to be in the driver's seat and see the control to him and Elon. I think Elon is really controlling a lot there too.
Yeah.
That's got to be acknowledged. So it's, if you're Mike Johnson, you're probably, as long as he's fine with giving up that power to Trump, he's probably feeling pretty good about where he's gotten so far, especially through the current budget. Now, the CR that they're negotiating that may end up leading us to a shutdown. Mm-hmm. Do you think that, the Republicans, when they did it to Obama, they never, they didn't help him get a CR passed or a budget passed or anything. We ended up going into shutdowns. We never saw that affect their approval ratings. Do you think that if Democrats try to do the same thing and Jeffries and them don't reach a deal, do you think we pay any penalty on this? And if we don't pay a penalty on it, should we go that route and see what happens?
I think we will. I think we'll suffer a penalty. Okay. But I still think the penalty, the offset of what we gain will be worth whatever penalty. So obviously, you're going to have the Republican base, specifically on social media, trying to spin it, and Democrats can't do this and Democrats can't do that, or blocking this, or being non-cooperative, or whatever that is. At the same time, this is their government, right? They have control. They have,
they're
they have
completely in the driver's seat.
Yeah, this should be pretty cut and dry for them. We have no obligation to really sort of make this work for them in any way. And I think the average American voter, or the ones that we're going after, that middle class, that working class voter, the undecided, the back and forth voters, I think they'll see that. I think they'll understand that. There might be a certain contingent of them who looks at it and says, Democrats are just being combative for combative's sake, but I don't think it's enough to really move the needle. I think generally speaking, we should. And everybody's kind of sick of politics, right? At this point, everybody's sick of the partisan bullshit, the back and forth. But and it's at this point, it's just like it comes with the territory. If you can't come to some sort of agreement for the CR, then in my opinion, if you're the party in control, that's going to be on you. And it's as much on them as it would be on Democrats, even more so. So I think the average voter would see that, or at least the one that's not on either base.
Yeah, I think we need to set a strong, this is where we're going to stand for. And, we need to get some things that we want. If you want our help, you need to do things that we want. And if we're not getting those, you're not getting our votes.
Yeah.
And, there again, they have all the votes that they could, to be able to get it done without us.
Right.
So make them make those votes.
Yeah.
And, put them on record as making those votes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't help Johnson out at all. I'd say this is what, give them the same thing that it would be if we were in power, and you either do this or you don't get our votes.
Yeah.
And see what happens. I think we need to force that. And I don't think, I'm going to disagree with you here, I don't think we're going to pay a penalty for it.
Yeah.
I know that people expect good governance of us. But there again, we're not the ones controlling it here.
Right.
So we got to stick to our core beliefs and what our core values are. And as long as we're doing that, and they're reflective of it in our, CR budget, then I think that we need to make that case to the public and say, hey, look, this is what we're willing to stand for. And the Republicans are not. So
yeah, I think that last point there is the most important point in whether or not we will pay a penalty. How do we message this? It has to be very clear that it's not just we're Democrats, they're Republicans, so we're fighting this. It has to be real, tangible things. We are fighting this because X, Y, Z. Right. We want this for the American people. That's not in this, so we're fighting it, or vice versa. So yeah, I think you're 100% right. That point will completely decide whether or not Democrats pay a penalty.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on, this week we and recently we've seen some advances in quantum computing. In Google and Microsoft, they're taking different approaches to quantum computing, and Google's kind of focusing more on error conduction or reduction for superconducting qubits, and Microsoft is betting on a topological qubits for scalability. I don't know if I say that word right. So I think I said both how I pronounce it. So whatever. Qubits, if I'm wrong, I don't know. It looks like qubits, but if I'm wrong, then y'all go ahead and tell us in the comments.
Tell us we're dumb.
So what do you think this is? Where is this taking us, Ian? What's your take on it?
I was actually out yesterday and I had a conversation with somebody. We were out with my daughter at a brewery here, and I was having a conversation with somebody, and they brought up this actual concept, and we're talking about AI and nano computers and all this stuff, and he made the comment, and I 100% agree with him. It's both scary and exciting at the same time, right? Like the capabilities that quantum computing and AI and all this is going to have. It didn't turn out to be. He brought this candidate up, and it didn't turn out that his campaign lasted all that long. But Mr. Andrew Yang, the War on Normal People, his book about starting to focus on UBI because AI and all this is going to start taking jobs, and he's right. It's obviously going to happen at one point or another. But I agreed with this person that it's both scary and exciting because there's so much possibility there and so much that can be done with it. But at the same time, you've got to think of yourself, like what becomes of, what becomes of me, or, what becomes of my job, or is the government prepared for when this, eventually starts costing people their, not eventually, it's happening now, but widespread, massive costs of jobs. Is the government going to work to, to make sure that Americans are taken care of?
Yeah. And, I don't want to be a Luddite. I'm not, right? Yeah. Like, I appreciate AI. I like the computing. Mm-hmm. One thing to kind of get our audience to understand is that a quantum computer is not like the computer that you have, say, sitting there in front of you, right? Like, they're not going to be, our laptops of the future will not likely be quantum computers. They don't work the same. Basically, a quantum computer is, as I understand it, is you can ask it questions and it answers those questions on the very basic scale. So there's going to be a difference there. I think where we're going to see quantum computing kind of kick out is, you're going to have Wall Street is going to have a tremendous advantage, because I think where you're going to first see it is that, companies are going to be able to rent time with these quantum computers, kind of like how it was with the internet when it was first starting out, or even the home computers when they first started coming out. People were able to buy time to be able to get access to it. And so the ultra wealthy are going to benefit first, and as well as corporations are going to benefit. However, there was a tweet that I saw, and I think I shared in our group chat earlier this week, about how that there are all these scientific labs that they are holding back currently on the info that they're also putting out to the public, because they are able to use just the AI that we have currently. This isn't even with the help of quantum computers, right. and they're able to starting to be able to identify, and we're going to talk about it in a minute, better vaccines, and
I was going to get into that.
Doing all types of protein foldings and making up new materials. I mean, that's what Microsoft ended up doing. They atom by atom created their new quantum computer chip, and they made it a completely new material by that, building atom by atom. So we're really getting into the age of, we're doing 200 years of academic work or scientific work in a year.
Yeah.
Which is
insane.
Insane, especially when you consider, where we've came just in the past 100 years. We went from the Wright brothers to, landing on the moon in 60 years or something like that.
Yep.
66 years, I think it was. So now when you're looking at all these different types of possibilities, I'm excited for the future.
Sure.
I don't see that quantum computing has to be bad, but there again, it's also, you got to understand where we're at in those production phases, because while Google and Microsoft have put out their papers, they're not at the level that they need to be able to be functional according to the public.
No. Like, this isn't happening tomorrow.
Right. This is 5 to 10 years out.
Yeah.
But
it's a conversation that needs to start right now.
Correct. And we need to be understanding from a policy perspective. And unfortunately, I don't want to depend on 70, 80, and 90-year-olds, in Congress trying to figure out how this is going to affect us, right? Yeah. That's why we need people my age and your age and younger that are coming into Congress that can deal and, understand what the full impact of these technologies are going to be.
Yep. Yeah, I 100% agree. We've got to know the scope, and we've got to know how and when this is gonna impact Americans, because it's coming, and the conversation needs to start now. So another sort of topic and it's not, just now, it's something that's been going on. It really rose to super prominence during COVID. And we're now kind of in the thick of it, particularly with RFK Jr. Being where he is now. The rise of the anti-vaccine movement, particularly in politics. So, what I don't know. We've got vaccine skeptics now holding public office. We've got vaccine skeptics in some of the highest cabinet positions in administration. Experts are saying, and rightly so, that this could lead to a rise in, diseases and things that we once thought were eradicated, and particularly like what's going on right now with the measles outbreak. It's just scary, man, right? Like it's just unbelievable that we're here now in 2025, that we're just going fucking backwards.
Yeah, and then I saw somewhere, I want to say it was actually Oregon of all places, that dysentery is making a comeback.
Trail.
Yeah, right. Like I always thought growing up, once you made it to Oregon, dysentery just didn't exist no more.
You're fucking golden.
So, yeah, we're old.
Yeah, shit. Yeah.
But it's really wild that just in the past, since I would say COVID, it made the people that were, the vaccine skeptics and stuff like that were always seen as like the hippies.
Oh yeah.
And they were left people, and now they're some of the most far right, and that it's really bred. Any conspiracy theory for whatever reason just spreads like wildfire on the right anymore.
Yeah.
So that definitely needs to be addressed at some point. Yeah. But not relying on science and saying like, RFK Jr. has said that vaccines are not peer reviewed. It's just absolute bullshit.
It's fucking ridiculous.
Vaccines have been massively proven safe. Being able to look at a chart and seeing the rise of autism and pointing at that as a sign of the reason why that, vaccines are the cause, instead of it being, autism is something that we just recently were able to kind of figure out. But it always existed. I had a grandfather that was really into trains, and I'm pretty sure he was probably on the spectrum somewhere, but we just didn't know it.
Yeah. What's the diagnosis then?
Yeah. So, it's kind of like the left-handed, if you go back and look at like the graph of people that identify as being left-handed, well, there was a time where if you were left-handed, it was viewed as being sinister, and or being gay. It's not that people are more gay now; it's just that more people are, able to talk about it, right? Yeah. So it's just a total lack of scientific understanding and wanting to comprehend. And I don't know how we combat that now. People have a severe mistrust in government because of COVID.
Yep.
There is a massive pushback against scientific advances, and I unfortunately think eventually one of these, between bird flu or the measles or something bad is going to just break out again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they just said there was another outbreak from Wuhan. Like, holy shit, man! Like, they said it's on the COVID level.
Easily transmittable. All the signs,
and we're pulling all the money out of NIH and everything. And what pisses me off so bad, Ian, is that one of the only redeeming qualities I took from the Trump first administration was Operation Warp Speed.
Yeah.
And now he acts like he didn't even fucking do that.
Nope.
Like the best thing of your whole fucking first that everybody should have really appreciated, and he totally distances himself.
It was so close to getting him reelected then too. Like that almost did it.
Yeah. So, it's...
I'm of the opinion...
I'm scared.
It's okay to ask questions, right?
Sure.
But it becomes dangerous when, regardless of what information you are presented, you keep asking that question, especially in a high-profile position or someone like RFK Jr. despite all the evidence to the contrary, despite all, he has this, oh, I was just asking questions, blah, blah, blah. And that is just, no, you're not. That's not what you're doing anymore. You're intentionally being misleading. You're intentionally, like, you know, personally, and we don't know this, and I know scientists are researching it right now. What is the actual impact of microplastics in, you know, in our blood system and stuff like that? Like, these are important questions that we need to have the answers to. But when the data is presented to you and when it's been researched and peer reviewed and for years and decades and all this stuff, you can't just keep, well, I'm just asking questions. Like, it's just dangerous.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, and something's got to give on that front. And I just don't know I don't know what that change is going to be. Hopefully it's not another pandemic or something that forces us there, but pulling us out of the World Health Organization and everything. I mean, it's just ridiculous and uncalled for.
Yep.
In other good news, we did have the pancreatic cancer vaccine is showing promise. There was a new one that was created, and they've been doing clinical trials, and it's potentially offering hope against one of the deadliest of cancers and one of the worst cancers.
Yep.
I saw that it's taken survivability rates from like 15% to over 50%.
Yeah.
Which is insane. I mean, that's going to save millions of lives.
Yep.
In the long scale. And this isn't the only cancer vaccine to come out of this. And that's one of the other things that's really frustrating is that we're talking about this, but the idea for these types of vaccines came from the COVID vaccine.
Right.
So it's, you know, it's incredibly frustrating that we have this stuff that's showing all this promise. And then, you know, if some celebrity like Michelle Trachtenberg died this past week at 39 and they're like, oh, was she vaxxed? Was she vaxxed?
Right.
No, she had her fucking liver transplant denied. Yeah. Like, you know, her body rejected a liver transplant. Like, y'all are stupid as shit right now. Like, dude, read a fucking book one fucking time.
Yeah. Anything. And we got, like, you know, RFK Jr. talking about pausing vaccine research in the United States for, I don't know, what's he saying, 7 years or something like that? Like, look at what we're doing. We're taking one of the most dangerous cancers that exist and improving your survivability rate by 40% or something like that. This is what can happen. This is what we're capable of if you don't strip this out of, you know, away from science and away from, you know, research and development. It's gonna, and the thing is, like, if you do that, no one's ever gonna really be able to put a number on the lives that you could have saved, right? It's like an opportunity cost, basically. You know, if he's not, I mean, it's so damn frustrating. We might not even know if you pause research for 7 years. Who knows what we would have come up with in the next 7 years? There's no possible way for us to know that right now. It could be something that saves hundreds of millions of lives. It could be something that takes this vaccine gets better over that period because of research and data, and suddenly it's not 52% or whatever, it's 75% or 80%. We just won't know that.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm smart enough to know that if the private sector is good enough to step in and do all this without federal funding. I don't know if we know that answer right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there is a lot of private sector work. I got a buddy that does, he's working on a cure for blindness right now. Well, not him personally, but the company he works at, he's a VP for. You know, so there, you know, I'd like to think that hopefully we're not as screwed as you and I think we are, and that the private sector will take some of these ideas and really scale them up and you know, really put all this stuff out there for us and keep it rolling. But I also think that if I'm going to spend my tax dollars on fucking near anything, curing cancer should be it's like number one. It's got to be up there. In the return that you get off of that type of spending too. I mean, if I could tell you, hey, Ian, every dollar that you invest, you're going to get $2 to $3 extra return, and you don't have to do anything but give me the money. Like, would we not want to keep doing that
all the time?
And that's what the multiplier effect in our economy is from all this NIH funding and stuff like that. So, stripping that out is going to have a massive effect. I mean, just $1.3 billion here in the RTP is being ripped out of our economy. That's going to have a massive effect for our state. You're going to probably see that on we were already forecast to being able to not meet budget standards. And, that's why our North Carolina General Assembly wants to do things like legalize, casinos and marijuana. And while, those things may be a fine idea, if done correctly, it's, we're going to still see massive impacts from this. And it's a compounding effect. It's kind of like what Eric was talking about with NOAA, is that taking that money out, you're losing compound effects. So let's take and pour our tax dollars into these things that help us and are beneficial to us. And this should be stuff that's bipartisan. This should be stuff that we all agree on, and that we should all want.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, that's like you said, like, and what Eric talked about with NOAA, like, and in the healthcare, like data and all this stuff, it's the private sector working along with government research and all that. There's a little bit of everything. Could the private sector take up the slack? Yeah, maybe. Is that going to make things more expensive? You bet your ass it will. Of course it will. There's no doubt about it. So yeah, that's kind of dangerous. But all right. So next, on to some more lovely news. All right. So debate over U.S. aid to Ukraine is maybe not at an all-time high, but it's back on the radar thanks to a particular event that occurred at the end of last week. There was a tense meeting between J.D. Vance, President Trump, and Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. So concerns are growing that the U.S. may significantly reduce or cut military aid to Ukraine. Trump has more or less said that, and more or less said, you're on your own now until you can come back and apologize, because all that stuff. So what's your take on this? I know this was a big campaign topic about how much money we were sending, and you had the people who thought we were just straight up writing billions and billions of dollars check or dropping giant wads of money down on there, when at least in part it was old equipment that we weren't going to use anymore, or that was being decommissioned or was about to go out, and is part of that, and we're replacing it with new stuff. What's your take on this? How do we, what does the landscape look like if we just cut off funding for Ukraine to defend themselves?
I'll start with that question first. If we just cut off all the funding, I think you're going to see what you're seeing right now happen. Number one, it diminishes our standing in the world. We've already seen places like Singapore say that, America is going to be our friend, but the Trump organization, the Trump presidency is not. We've seen the European Union call for a new leader of the free world. We have seen Finland, one of their largest refuelers, deny one of our subs refueling capabilities with them. So these are we're already seeing
it's happening right now,
right? Like there are real world effects that are already happening. Couple that with the cancelization of U.S. aid, it's only going to cede power and soft power at that to Russia and China. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a debate there on Ukraine, right? But the funding that, you pointed it out, the funding that we were sending was not actual specific cash dollars. Right. It was either through aid. There was money that was sent directly for aid, and, was accounted for. And then there was a lot of that, hey, we're just sending equipment and that has to be replaced. So that money's really going directly right back into our own pockets. Right. So while we are technically spending that on paper, we're also replacing old ass equipment that we were going to scrap anyway and replacing it with newer stuff. It comes down to, if you want to downsize Pete Hegseth had said that, he wanted to reduce our budget by 8% in DOD. Well, if you want to do that, then why don't we just keep sending some of that equipment that we don't have to maintain to Ukraine, right? I mean, and just not replace it. That's a cost savings. But I think defending an ally on the world stage that was invaded should be something that we do.
Yeah.
And to say that Ukraine can't win this war because there's more Russians, go back and look at, I mean, are you going to say the same thing about the Vietnam? In Vietnam, we outnumbered and had the size advantage. You could go back to looking at the French resistance.
Yeah.
If people had that mindset, we wouldn't be a country.
No.
Because we took on a ragtag group of folks here in America. The founding fathers took on the largest military at the time, and we won.
Yeah. Something to be said for home field advantage.
Right. So I think what we also saw on Friday was one of the most disrespectful displays that we have ever seen come out of the White House, and that's saying something.
Yeah.
I was embarrassed as an American. I mean, that's just number one, I found it gross for why he was even there. We're getting mineral rights. We're inviting him to our country and saying, hey, you got to give up vital resources for your country for us to keep supporting you.
Yeah.
When you were invaded, right, and your people are being slaughtered. And that's just not okay with me, number one. But he was there to actually do that and to talk about peace. And then all JD Vance had to do was just keep his fucking mouth shut.
Shut the fuck up, JD.
And to say that he's never said thank you, he gave a whole address to Congress where he said thank you. I know some people have pointed out that Biden even told him, to be more grateful. I think last year or something.
Had, right? Yep.
Yeah. And I don't know if that was right either. I kind of get that if my country had been invaded, I don't know, gratitude would probably be the first thing on my mind. I mean, I would, be grateful for what's happening, but I don't know if I would in real time feel the need that I got to go around and kiss everybody's ass about it.
Like, what is the expectation? Does this person have to bend over and kiss your feet every week just to make sure you remember that he's, still thankful? Obviously, you're helping him keep his people alive. You're helping him keep himself alive.
Yeah, and just it's just sad to me, the whole damn thing, man, because the Ukrainians are literally fighting their ass off, and it's like what Zelenskyy said. That didn't really get played, and it was something that I think he said before we got to see the whole exchange, in where he said, Trump said something about it's not in your cards or whatever, and he's like, I'm not here to play cards, and if your position on peace is that you want me to just give up everything, I could do that myself. I don't need you to do that. That's not why I'm here.
No.
They don't want to give up the land, and they don't want to give up what they're fighting, for and everything. And to say that, Russia's got all these drones and stuff, dude, Ukraine, we can give them just as much. I mean,
for sure.
I think they were taking down, the general estimates is that it was 1 Ukrainian dead for every 7 or 8 Russians right now. They took out almost the whole Russian Navy, and they don't even have a fucking Navy.
Yeah.
So.
I still remember the days leading up to the war starting, and we knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when they did it. And the conversation was that it would take 2 to 3 days for Russia to take Kyiv. Like that's how long it would take. And here we are years later, and it's still going on. And like you said, Ukraine's holding their own, more than holding their own. They are, but they don't want this to go on forever. I mean, they can't keep having their citizens dying, and it's just to make him come. And there was the tweet that came out. It basically said, and you could see when Zelenskyy first showed up and he wasn't wearing a suit, like Donald Trump took massive offense to that and made some, snide comments about it. And I'm like, seriously? There's a fucking war going on in their country. His citizens are dying, and you're mad because he's not dressed in a suit. Like, come the fuck on.
Yeah, and I'm sure he didn't give a shit about John Fetterman when he was there kissing his ass at Mar-a-Lago about wearing a suit. But
fucking shorts and a hoodie.
And then, Winston Churchill, when he came to talk to FDR, wasn't wearing. There's many pictures showing him in a little, like, painter's outfit or some shit. I don't know what the fuck he was wearing. But
I love a good suit. I wear suits. I mean, they're great. It's 2025, man. Who the fuck cares?
Yeah, for sure. That should not have pissed him off as much as it did, but I think they were just looking for something or anything.
It was there to beat him up.
But, to hear Russian talking points directly echoed in our White House is just
scary,
extremely disconcerting to me.
Scary.
And, at the end of the day, I think we all want to see an end to the war, but the war could end real quick if Putin just left.
Yeah,
it's fucking done.
Off, dude.
And you want to blame Zelenskyy for starting World War III? No, motherfucker. It was fucking Putin.
Yep.
He's the one that got North Korean troops in there because his own troops were getting their fucking ass handed to him. He put North Korean troops right on the front line, 10,000 of them. He's also been shipping in ammunition from China.
Yep.
So, all of these motherfuckers that we don't want to be getting along with are the ones that are there, and they're the ones that are starting the World War III. This shit all fucking ends the minute Russia says, all right, we've had enough, we leave.
Yep.
It's done.
Yep.
And so, that's what people really need to be cognizant of.
Yep.
So
100%.
Yeah. Well, all right, that wraps up our headlines for the weekend. Now it's time for our favorite segment, Jackass of the Week.
And this week's Jackass is none other than President Donald Trump. His recent Oval Office meeting that we've talked about with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy was a masterclass in diplomatic disaster.
Yeah, instead of fostering dialogue, Trump and J.D. Vance decided to berate Zelenskyy, accusing him of, as we just talked about, gambling with World War III and being disrespectful.
I mean, when your guest is fighting a war to defend his country, maybe don't lecture him about diplomacy from the comfort of the Oval Office.
Exactly. This isn't The Apprentice, Don. You can't just fire foreign leaders because they don't kiss your ring.
And let's not forget, this public dressing down not only embarrassed Zelenskyy, but also sent a terrible message to our allies. Way to go, Mr. fucking Art of the Deal.
Do we want to expand on this anymore?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think we've really kind of railed on this, Ian, but, I can't think of anything that is more honorable of this award than, I don't know if we'll ever top this.
No.
I hope to God we never have a bigger, award winner here for the week than we have here. But
the one thing I think I will maybe kind of throw in there is this probably, maybe not in equal parts, but pretty damn close to it, could have gone to J.D. Vance as well as like a co-recipient of this award, because he's the one that really turned it off the rails. Like, I think based on everything that we know now, I think it maybe would have eventually gotten there anyway. But the comment that J.D. Vance made when Zelenskyy, I wouldn't even say corrected him, but explained to him that this fucking quote unquote diplomacy that they're implementing with Putin and the ceasefire deals that he's, talked about, that's just true. I'm sorry you don't like that answer, but that was just true. And then, J.D. Vance gets up there, oh, you're going to litigate this in front of the American people. No, like, he is you have both accused him at some point over the last couple of weeks of starting this fucking war. Then you bring him in and try to make categorically false statements about something you clearly don't understand. And then you get pissed at him for correcting you. It's just fucking absurd. So, dude, it's for me, it's almost equal parts. Both, it's still Trump, but it's equal parts almost for both of them. And it's like you said, I hope that it never gets fucking worse than this, because this is just terrible.
Yeah. And I will say this is that Zelenskyy offered to JD Vance to come and see everything, and he just was like, "Oh, I've seen videos. I've seen it on Google Maps." Like, bro, no, go. I'm pretty sure if you wanted to go over there and have access to anything you wanted, I'm pretty sure that if you were really genuine and wanting to know everything that was going on, that could have been done. But it would have taken a little bit of humility. And that's something that
they just don't have it.
White House just doesn't fucking have.
Nope.
It would have taken some humility and some caring. And I just don't. Everything about that interaction tells me that they really did not give a shit and that they were going to derail this in some form or fashion. And then they're even putting out edited video of the interaction to make it where Zelenskyy looks worse. And that's just not transparency. That's not how this should be ran at all. No. They even let in a Russian news service. They say mistakenly, but anybody that knows anything about how to get into the White House, nothing happens by mistake.
No.
So we got Russian news media that's there, but organizations like Reuters and AP are not. And here again, man, it's just things are not good, and I can't stress it enough. It's really shitty. So, for turning a critical diplomatic meeting into a reality TV showdown, President Trump, you're going to be our jackass of the week.
Congratulations. You have truly outdone yourself this time.
Well, all right. That's a wrap for this week. We've covered a lot: government chaos, scientific progress, and of course, this week's biggest jackass.
Yeah, and something tells me we won't have a shortage of jackasses to choose from next week either.
But until then, make sure you're following Jackass Politics wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you liked the show, hell, even if you hated it, leave a review, drop a comment, and tell a friend or tell an enemy. We don't care. Just spread the word.
And don't forget to hit us up on Twitter at Jackass Politics, because we're always down to hear what you think.
Stay informed, stay engaged, and as always,
don't be a jackass. See ya.
Later, guys.